All right, I'm recording my post-read thoughts today for The Running Man by Stephen King. It was originally published by Richard Bachman. I've actually almost read all of the Bachman books. I think I only have one left, which I believe is the Regulators. And I kind of am mixed on the Bachman books as a whole. I mean, I like that they do have kind of a distinct feel from a lot of other King works where they're very, I mean, bleak is the word that I use, and that's not to say that other King books aren't, but there's just not a whole lot of redemptive qualities, usually about either the protagonist or just kind of like the world that we find ourselves in. So I think my favorite of them is The Long Walk. And that's a book that after I finish it, even like the more I've thought about it over time, it just keeps getting better. But that's about like as bleak of a world as could be, and the outcome for 99% of the characters is pretty terrible. This I think is like an interesting, I don't want to say like sister novel because it's obviously very different, but kind of a companion where you do have a similar idea where it's like some sort of a dystopian future and you have a kind of like game-esque thing happening and you kind of track the protagonist through it, which I think is kind of intriguing. And I guess they're the two Bachman books that are the most similar because of that. This one in particular, even though it's not the worst Bachman book because Rage and Roadwork are pretty terrible, I still thought this was not very good, sadly. And I had heard a lot about it. I've never seen the movie, but I've heard a lot about it, I guess because the movie has a pretty positive reputation and was a pretty big movie back in the day. While the book has a really interesting kind of setup where the protagonist Ben Richards is on like in this crazy dystopian world, their like flagship kind of game show network type thing where he can make a lot of money. This is like their marquee, kind of show, and he desperately needs some money for his family, so he signs up for this, and he's basically just the number one most wanted person. And they try, there's people that try to track him down, and he's just on the run out in the world. The conceit of it, I think, is interesting. Maybe because I'm reading this in a post Hunger Games, post Squid Game, like all these kind of dystopian-esque things that this probably inspired in a lot of ways. Now reading this after the fact, I just think that the book ends up being shockingly pretty boring for the most part, and I just don't understand how that's possible given that this is a pretty interesting setup. And it's like, hey, he's on the run anywhere in this country. Like, he can basically do anything. You would think that could be really interesting and it could go. And for some reason, it's really just not. Which I thought was it was just really unfortunate because I do think as Ben Richards is getting established as a character at the onset and we learn about like really how dire the just the entire like outlook is in the world and why he's so desperate to need to do this, you do feel some sympathy for him. And I thought as he was going like to the building that's headquartered for the games and everything, I kind of liked that setup that we were driving to. But then really once he starts the game onward, I was bored probably like 80% of the time. I like the sequence where he's at, I think they call it the YMCA, but he's at some kind of a gym, and then there's like apartments that are near it that he stays in, and he realizes all of a sudden, like he looks out the window and realizes that the hunters are like closing in on him and he's got to go like right then. And so he comes up with a strategy to go to the basement of the building, and he actually like lights the something on fire in the basement, which ends up exploding the building, and he has to like crawl his way through like the pipe system and everything. And that sequence I thought was actually interesting because it was like, oh, his back is up against the wall, he's got to come up with something creative to get out of this. And I like that. But really none of the other set pieces I liked at all. He comes across a few supporting characters, didn't really care for him. I think the struggle, everything is from Ben's perspective in this book, which I think actually doesn't work. A lot of times I do like that because you get so much time spent in their thoughts and everything, that you get to know the character super well. Because Ben's not a great character and he's not very well realized, you kind of get none of it. You don't really get a deep character look at him, or you get you don't get it other than the interaction between him and supporting characters. You get nothing else from them, and that I think was a mistake because he comes across some pretty interesting people. They cross paths for just a handful of chapters, and then they're gone. And you might hear in passing something that happened to them or whatever, but you don't get any kind of a follow up on it besides that. So that I thought was disappointing. I know a through line and a theme of this book is propaganda and the role that kind of plays, 1984-esque on people and how it manipulates people, and, decisions or perceptions can kind of be based on obviously false information and the role that plays in society. And I think that's a very important thematic thing. Obviously works a lot better in something like 1984 than this, because I really struggle with, if the world is so destitute and so poor, even if the government has some kind of a forced message, or they're kind of like doctoring images or something to make you think, if the system is so bad and most people in this world are so far, I just have a really hard time wondering why you would be rooting for the authorities to catch this person. It doesn't really make sense to me. And to that point, like, the couple of supporting characters that he comes across that do help him, it gives you that idea of like, oh, people might actually have his back and help him. To me, that would be the majority of the population of just like, why would I want the authorities to, like, he should be the person that represents the antithesis of like beating that system, I guess. But instead, for some reason, like, and again, I get the propaganda angle, I just don't know that it's really that compelling for this, because if the world is that dire, what does it help you to cheer for this person to just get tracked down and killed by society? Like, if society sucks, he's not really representing anything different, like anything worse, I guess I should say. So the whole conceit of it just like wasn't very interested in like what actually unfolds for Ben. Didn't really care about the supporting characters, mainly because we're just not given that much time with them. The whole conceit of it, besides the thematic element, just didn't really work for me. So all the way through this, I just didn't think it was that compelling, which is disappointing. And I guess I'll spoil the ending briefly just to kind of discuss it. So when he gets on the plane, that whole part, like, I was just so bored just waiting for something that was going to happen. When he starts talking to Killian again, who I do like Killian as a character, but again, like, aside from the beginning and the very end, we don't get anything with him in the book, which I think is a shame. But when he reveals that Ben's family has already been killed, like, it's a wrap. And that's ostensibly the whole thing that Ben has been working towards. So he gets this kind of interesting proposal of like, hey, you can come work for us. You can become the new headhunter, basically, because of how good he was. Kind of interesting. But then, Killian reveals that his family's dead, and so it's a wrap after that, right? I thought the reveal, for some reason, I didn't think through, oh yeah, they're probably already dead, or they were used as a leverage. And I did question if he was being truthful for a second, but that reveal did kind of hit me of like, oh, that was basically all that he had left in this world that really, really sucks, and it's gone. That I thought was a cool idea, and then instantly after, it just, he ends up killing everybody on the plane, and then he ends up crashing the plane into the headquarter building of the games, where like everything is set up and stationed, and that's like literally how the book ends. It just wasn't. I think it's supposed to be like a go Ben moment for like trying to topple the system. The way that it worked, it just didn't feel like it was very. And it literally happens like on the last page of the book. There's no resolution to it anywhere after that, so it just fell very flat for me. Also, King in this book, for some reason, at the start of every chapter, there's a minus. Like, it starts with a minus 100 and counting, and each subsequent chapter it goes minus 99, minus 98. At first I thought it was like counting down to something. It literally just goes to the end of the book. Like, the last book is just minus 0 and counting. So it basically it's just the number of chapters that are left in the book, and I could not figure out why he did that. There's no rhyme or reason to the length of the chapters either. Like, there's just some questionable stuff about this where it seemed like the idea of it was cool. Execution just didn't really work for me at all. So yeah, I mean, there's more that I could say about the specifics, but by and large, just mostly there wasn't a lot here that I really cared about. I think as far as the Bachman books go, it's not in that bottom tier, but it's definitely not towards the top either. It'd be somewhere kind of towards the bottom. When I read the last one, I'll have to put together like my list of where I think they stack up against each other. But yeah, I'll think on where I want to place it on my overall King list, but it's gonna be pretty low, which is kind of a shame. But I expected more from it, I guess, just from the reputation. But that again could just be the more so the reputation of the movie coming through. So it is what it is. But I hope for a little bit more depth to it. I wish that there was just something more interesting that came out of the actual game sequence, because again, it's a cool idea. Sadly, it just didn't really work for me. I think The Long Walk is superior in about every single way to this book in terms of characters, plot intrigue, what actually happens, the ending, all of it is better. So if I was going to recommend a Bachman book to somebody, it would definitely be The Long Walk. And I really wouldn't recommend this book at all, personally, unless somebody's a King completionist or they wanted to read it like after seeing the movie to compare it or something like that. So that's my thoughts. I think I'm at 2 stars. For me, 1.5 stars means bad, like outright. And I want to give it a little bit more credit than that, because to his credit, like the book does flow pretty easily. And I think at least at the beginning, like it is set up where like you do want to know what happens. So I don't want to call it outright bad, but I definitely think it's subpar, and it's definitely like trending towards bad. So I think I would give it 2 stars, and I'll have to see where it lands on the overall list. But those are my quick initial post-read thoughts of The Running Man. Thanks for watching.